What does the pandemic look like to people across Wyoming? In this episode of What's Your Why, we are sharing stories of how the pandemic has changed lives. Please listen and then go to our website to read more about people's personal journal entries and writings submitted to contribute to this historical time. This is Wyoming Pandemic Stories, and today we're talking to Scott Henkel. Scott, tell us how the coronavirus has affected your life and your work.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. So I'm a prof at the University of Wyoming, and I am the director of the Wyoming Institute for Humanities Research. And at mid-semester is when we had to change everything. All of our classes went from being in-person to online, and that just required a wholesale change in everything that we do. I've been a teacher in various ways, maybe for about 2.5 decades. And I have developed ways of teaching over those years, and not everything, but a lot of that has just been upended in the past weeks. But as the director of the Research Institute, we do public programming that previously was on campus, lectures and events and readings and workshops and all sorts of ways to share the teaching and research that happens at the university with the public writ large in the States, country, and around the world. And in the past, 3-4 weeks, we've had to retool all of that programming so that it's all online, rearranging speakers, figuring out what works in a virtual format, what doesn't work in a virtual format. But here's the thing. While it's all very hard, the values of public education, the values of sharing our knowledge with the public and listening to what they say about it, the conversation between what happens in the classroom or what happens in the laboratory, what happens in the library, and people in the world. I mean, those vital conversations back and forth are what drive our public engagement. And much of that, I'm proud to say, still exists in this new format. It's virtual, it's via Zoom or whatever, but I'm super proud that even in this much changed world, we're still able to serve the public. I'm very proud of that. There's a poem that a couple of friends have sent to me that I think really, it has really helped me to think about this changing world and what it is to do. The poem is called To Be of Use, and it's by Marge Piercy. The people I love the best jump into work head first, without dallying in the shadows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know that they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
That was wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jenna Mahaffey. I am a graphic designer and writer in Jackson, Wyoming, and this is my pandemic story. So I guess when this all kind of like broke loose, and really I think the day that it hit for me was when we were watching the news and Trump had announced that the borders would be closing between Europe and the U.S. And I actually had a friend who was planning on going on a ski trip, and he was sitting with me kind of watching this like, oh shit, like I have to unpack my bags. And he was literally scheduled to leave in like, the next day. And I think that was maybe Wednesday. And on Monday, everything had sort of shut down. And on Sunday, we had, seen the resort shut down after 17 inches of snow. And it really started to hit then. And as someone who is self-employed, my first reaction was that I might be okay, right? Because I work remotely already. Like I have a desk set up with everything that I need, and, I have my workspace dialed, and I'm pretty comfortable working from home. One thing that I did not necessarily expect were to have, a fair number of clients not necessarily say like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore, but more just put a hold on projects, right? And I think perhaps probably like the most difficult thing to grapple with was really just like this loss of like the idea of having a goal, right? And I've been a graphic designer since I was 22, since I graduated college, and I've written since I was 22 professionally. And I've gone kind of in and out of full-time jobs and freelance work, and this is going on my second full-time year of really being completely self-employed. And I really did I had a really great first year, and I wanted to kind of knock it out of the park in terms of, how much I was making and the work I was doing and the projects that I was getting. And I think that was a hard thing to grapple with, was that goal is probably, things are better now, but that goal wasn't necessarily going to happen. And I acknowledge the fact that, I'm palpably aware of my privilege and that I wasn't necessarily suffering. But I also, at one point, figured like, I think it's okay to be upset by the fact that I did have a lack of work and that I was frustrated by the unknown. And like I said, kind of saddened by these goals that now felt impossible. And moreover, just annoyed and really frustrated by what feels like, or perhaps just really was, kind of this robbery in the face of a public health crisis, right? And I do stand behind the idea that this could have been prevented. The shutdown could have been a lot better handled than it was. And basically, I kind of like approached it with this idea that like, all right, there's comfort in solidarity. Like at least like there are so many other Americans that are unemployed and are still unemployed. There are plenty of freelance creatives who are feeling the wrath of what's going on just as much, if not harder than I am. But, I felt a little bit like I was sad. I was upset, but really at the end of the day, like I was bummed out. And I think that's because it's just like when you are, whether you're a graphic designer or a filmmaker or whatever, but when you work for yourself, like so much of goals and motivation has to come from yourself, right? And that was a tough thing to kind of understand and work around. Unfortunately, like I've had a lot of clients who seem like they're in better places, and the small businesses and the nonprofits that I work with are kind of coming back to their, regular scheduled programming. And I do have more work, but it is this hard thing to, I think also as a freelancer, you're always wondering like, oh God, like work ebbs and flows so often. When will it ebb and when will it flow? When will I be busy and when will I not? And it was a little scary to have not that much work for such a long period of time. That's something that usually has always kind of, made me lose a little bit of sleep. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm palpably aware of how lucky I am to live in a place like Jackson and not, an urban center like New York City, and to have the outdoor spaces that we have to play and to explore. And I think, I've got a PPP loan, which was great. And, we had government funding, and I volunteer with Whole Food Rescue. So I kept my days fairly busy. And I think, at the end of the day, like, it really could have been a lot worse than it was. But it is still something that I'm kind of trying to understand, is like that idea of like, what does it mean to kind of not consciously, but like, inadvertently kind of lose sight of what you've been working so hard for. And, especially when it's not your fault. I think that's a really tough thing to understand.
Thanks, Jenna.
My name is Joanna Kale. I am the executive director of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. I'm a mom and a wife in Lander, Wyoming, and here is my COVID-19 story. COVID-19 has changed my life in just really understanding the way Wyoming comes together, the way our communities come together in crisis. My daughter is a senior at Lander Valley High School, and it has been beautiful to see how our families and parents and leaders in our little community have come together to recognize the seniors of COVID-19 of 2020. It's been inspiring to see when people need to sacrifice what they'll do to help one another and come together. We've put together these banners on Main Street. We had a fantastic parade for our kids, and we're about to do a celebration with a big fireworks show and a graduation. I think it's just been incredible to see what Wyomingites do when we are called in these sorts of crises to come together. I guess that's how it's changed my life in a way, to know that we can sacrifice. It's terrible what our poor state, it breaks my heart what our poor state is going through right now. But I really have faith that we're going to come out of this. I have faith that we're going to do even better next year. We're going to conquer this, and we're going to be stronger for it.
My name is Marcia Hensley. I live in Laramie, Wyoming. The pandemic has affected my life in an interesting way. My grandson, who was a college student, had come out to go skiing on his spring break from college. He went to school at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. While he was here, they closed the school and said that they would just be doing online classes. So he has been living with me ever since, because his mother lives in New York City, and that wasn't a good place to go to, and his dad lives in China. So I was the safest place to be, and he has been, he finished his college years. It was his senior year. We made a little makeshift office for him in my living room, and he finished all his courses online here, and we had a graduation on Zoom, a ceremony with family, and now he is an intern with Microsoft, but they are also doing their internships remotely. So he is here for the rest of the summer, and he has a little office where he's going to do his Microsoft work, and still living with me. And we have no idea whether the university he's been accepted to for graduate school will be having online classes or real classes. So I'm having a wonderful opportunity to spend a lot of time with my grandson because of the pandemic, and it's been good to have his company and his help during this time. I'm so pleased that because of the pandemic, even though it's been a terrible thing, it's been a real joy for me to have this time with my grandson and to be able to offer safe haven for him at a time when he really needed it. And I think this is a time we will always remember and will be a life-changing experience for both of us.
This is Stephen Lottridge. I'm a retired 83-year-old psychologist living in Jackson, Wyoming. The pandemic has affected me in many ways. One of the primary ways has been that I am unable to be close to or touch my family and friends. And I am a person who thrives on physical touch and close contact with people that I care about. So I find that I have turned to other resources and other beings. And one of them is the trees that live with me in my yard. They're not really my trees, they're simply their own beings living there. But I have come to seek physical contact with them and have found it very moving and very reassuring in this time of isolation.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.